I loved being an electrician. It was great. It was back then, it was still one of the highest paid trades out there. It was relatively easy work. I got to work inside, which was nice. You get to learn some really incredible knowledge around electricity and some pretty cool skills. I had started the trade relatively early as well, so I was actually on track to be a journeyman by the time I was 21, 22 years old, which would have been nice. And I saw myself working where I was at for a fairly long time, or even potentially starting my own company at some point. But after some time working there, I started to look around and pay more attention. I started to interview my future. And I had looked at all the men and women I worked with that had been there 10, 15, 20 years longer than I had, and looked at what their life actually entailed. In all areas, not just career and money, but every area of their life. And honestly, it started to scare me. My hope with this video is to really connect with somebody who may be experiencing the same things that I was in my career 6.5 years ago before I quit and got into business for myself. And at the end, I'm gonna share some things that I realized about what is really important when it comes to determining what you wanna do with your future for you and your family and where you guys wanna go. So I grew up like a lot of Canadian families, watching my parents work in and around trades most of my life. My father runs an ironworking company, and he's done that most of his life and my entire life. My mother did that at points with him as well before she became a firefighter in Calgary. She's actually one of the first female firefighters on the force, which was really cool. Actually, I believe she was the 11th female firefighter ever on the force, which I'm so proud of her for. It's such an incredible accomplishment. So you can imagine for me, it was pretty natural just being around trades and on job sites when I was growing up. I started at a young age. I would go to work with my dad in the summers, and just started with like picking up garbage around the site or walking around the building that they were putting up and picking up the screws that guys had lost or dropped during the day. Then I graduated to learning how to cut and install insulation. That was super fun, not really. And then from there, I learned how to run the equipment properly. And then I learned how to stand steel beams, and I learned how to walk steel beams 20, 30 feet in the air. And by the time I was 18 in the summers, I was helping my father. I was helping him by running crews at 18 years old with him in the summer. And so I loved it. Like, it was a lot of fun, to be honest. And I had thought at one point that I would take over the family business. I know my dad would be super proud and would have loved for me to do that. But I told him, I remember very clearly one winter break. I had typically done a lot of work in the summer with him, but one Christmas break, we went out to a really small town about 5 hours north of where I live in northern Canada. And we were out there working in a man basket, him and myself, and it was minus 35 degrees Celsius without the wind chill. So with the wind chill, it was minus 40, minus 45. It was not fun, to be honest. And I can clearly remember I had these little blue Haley Hansen gloves on, and then I had these big white worker mitts on, and I was trying to make the bolts. I was taking the bolt and the nut and screwing it just on a little bit and then handing it to him to get ready to do the next pillar that we were putting up. And I remember I could barely even turn my fingers. I was so cold. And I looked over at my dad, and all he had was his little tiny blue Haley Hansen gloves, and his hands were almost steaming. And at that point I was like, I'm not cut out for this. This ain't for me, Dad. I'm sorry. I would love to take over your business, but I'm too much of a sissy. I cannot work in this weather for my whole life. So that was kind of the end to me potentially taking that over. So when I finished high school, I knew right away that I was just not going to go to university. It wasn't for me. And I'm sure lots of people are in that boat, by the way. And if you are, know that there's nothing wrong with not going to university if you don't feel it's for you. I played football at a very competitive level. I got offers to go to a couple of schools, and I literally said, you cannot pay me to go to school. It's not for me. I didn't want to do it. So I immediately went and got into trades, and I decided to play junior football as well. Did very well there. But once I got into trades, I was like, man, let me go and become an electrician. Electrician was an awesome trade to be in because you got to work inside, you got paid really well, it was relatively easy. Everyone in trade says it's like the cushy job to have. And once I really got into the trade, I started to realize that obviously there was things about it I didn't love. Kind of like any job that we do, there's always parts of it that we don't love. And for me, it was less about the trade itself, it was more about the politics around the company. Where, if you were told to just do X job and shut your mouth and make sure you get it done, or if you weren't at X position in the company or or X, if you weren't a second year, third year, fourth year, whatever. If you were not held at a certain stature, you got absolutely no say in what was going on. You were kind of just treated like, I don't want to say like dirt, but you weren't treated great, to be honest, right? And I'm sure that some people listening have experienced that before. But I just said, whatever, I'll put my time in, I'll go do my 4 years and then get my ticket, and then I can decide what I want to do from there. I can continue with the company, I can go start my own. Whatever I want to do is what I can go and do. But another problem started to arise because right around this time, I was actually introduced to a part-time business I was referred to it through a friend of my mother's that was at the fire department. And it was with World Financial Group, which is the brokerage that I run now. It's the company I operate my brokerage through now. But I'd mainly gotten started with the opportunity part-time because I just wanted to learn more about personal finance. Like, how does money actually work in Canada? I was pretty young at the time, and most of us never learn about money when we grow up. We're never taught anything, and it's something that I really want to understand. But what happened was it exposed me to a different environment than I had ever been exposed to before, and made me start thinking differently about different ways of living my life and working and raising a family. And it made me very aware of my everyday life day to day. Like, it made me very aware of what was going on around me on a day-to-day basis. So when I would go to my full-time job as an electrician, I would start picking up on different things while I was there that I normally wouldn't. I would start picking up on, how were guys treating each other at work? How did the men I was working with talk about their wife while they were at work? How did they talk about money? How did they think about money? Were they saving money at all? Or were they always talking about being broke, right? How were their bodies? Were they in good physical shape, or were they letting themselves go? Were their bodies broken after working in the trade for 15, 20 years? And it just, honestly, it started to scare me a little bit. I didn't really know what to do or what to think. It just made me realize that most of the guys that I worked with had no purpose in what they were doing. They weren't showing up for any reason other than just to show up. They didn't care about the work. They didn't think it was making a difference. There was no purpose to what they were doing, and they didn't really have any fulfillment in it. But then on the other side of things, when I would go to my part-time business, I was being introduced to, couples that had 2, 3, 4 kids. They had incredible marriages. They saved lots of money. They cared about their health. They took care of themselves. They were giving back to the community, whether it was charity or their time in other events. It just showed me a different way of living that I wasn't really used to. So I started taking my part-time business a lot more seriously. And I would work early mornings as an electrician. I was up at 5:30 so I could be at the job site early enough. I would work that as an electrician until about mid-afternoon, right? Usually 3 or 4 o'clock, just depending on the day. Go home for a little bit, and then I'd work into the late evening, 6, 7, 8 o'clock on my part-time business. And I was working on, things like just getting trained. I had no experience in the financial industry. I didn't know what I was doing. I had to get a license. I had to learn product. I had to start to build some clientele. And yes, it was very hard in the beginning. It was simple, but it was very difficult at points. And I did have to make a lot of sacrifices, but looking back now, all that stuff was worth it for sure. Because after 8, 9 months of doing that on a part-time basis, I was starting to make almost the same income part-time as I was as my full-time job. I was like, well, kind of just makes sense. I'm getting paid more. I like the environment. So I had decided to quit my full-time job, my safe, stable job that everybody told me I was so crazy to do. Just wait a couple more years, go get your ticket. Why would you quit this? It's something you can always fall back on. I heard it all a million times. But I decided, look, I am gonna go and bet on myself. I'm gonna take a chance. I'm gonna bet on me and what I think I can do, and I'm just gonna go for it. And yes, it was hard, and I was very scared, and there were a lot of doubts, but I had faith in the people that I was working with and around that it was gonna help get me to where I wanted to be in life, instead of end up working at a job where I had no purpose or fulfillment 15, 20 years down the road. And what I learned was there is a completely different life available on the other side of all of those things that I just mentioned, all of the doubts, the worries, the things I was scared about. If I was able to put in the work, and by the way, that life is available to anybody. It doesn't matter what your current situation is. If you're willing to make the sacrifices, get uncomfortable, and put in the work, you can have it as well. And we're a long way off of where we're going to be 20 years from now, but man, I'm so grateful that I decided to make a decision to go and do something else for my family. Because now, instead of getting up in the morning and not having a ton of purpose or just going to work to go to work, I get excited about what the opportunity is. And is every day great? No, I still have trouble. Everyone still has troubles. It doesn't matter how great their life looks. Everyone still has their own issues. But I get excited knowing I get to do something with purpose. I get to help people. I get to work around people that I enjoy. I get to build something for myself and my family that is ours, that is gonna last for generations to come and last long term. So my advice to millennials or anyone else who's thinking of quitting their job or wanting to do something else, go and look around and find something that you actually enjoy. Now, are you gonna love it every day? Absolutely not. If anyone tells you that, that's a load of BS. It's not true. You won't love everything you do every day, but you should enjoy it more days than you don't. And look for an environment or a culture that is gonna challenge the way that you're currently thinking. It's gonna open your eyes to different way of living or thinking or asking yourself better questions. Because the truth is, if we knew everything we needed to know to have the kind of life that we wanna have, we would already be there. So if you're not where you wanna be, it's because there's something missing. There's a puzzle piece that isn't quite there yet, and you have to go learn new things. And the only way to learn new things is to put yourself in a different environment. Typically one that'll even make you a little bit uncomfortable, because discomfort is what actually helps you move forward in life. And that's what I realized when thinking about having a better future for my family and where we wanna go and what's really important to determining that. It just comes back to those questions that we're asking ourselves. And if you're in an environment where you're not being asked better questions, you're not gonna get to where you wanna go. So do what you can, ask yourself better questions, and let me know if you have anything that you're ever curious about when quitting your job and moving on to something else.